Coming fresh off of their week 1 victory between the Los Angeles Rams and the Chicago Bears, former host Bear Motter is going to dive into some of his takeaways in this game. And then we're going to flip the page looking into week 2 between the Rams and the Indianapolis Colts. Should be a juicy game between two teams with two new quarterbacks. A little bit unfamiliar in terms of the foes, but it should be fun. Make sure to tune in to this episode of the Locked On Rams podcast.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rams Nation, how's it going? As always, it is your boy, your host, Sosa Kremenjas. I'm a fantasy analyst at PFF and your host here at the Locked On Rams podcast, your number one daily podcast covering the Los Angeles Rams and part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode, like they always are, is going to be a good one. It's our first post-game Victory Wednesday, I guess you can call it, here with my man, Bear Motter, the former host, of course. We're going to share some of our takeaways, of course, from this first game, the week 1 contest between the Rams and the Bears, get Brad's side of things, kind of hear out where he's standing with this team right now. And then we're going to take a turn into week 2 and officially spend the rest of the week looking at that matchup between the Los Angeles Rams and the Indianapolis Colts. It's going to be obviously a very interesting game that we're not really too familiar with when it comes to the Colts. The last time the Rams played these guys was in 2017, I believe. The opening game of the Sean McVay era, if I'm not mistaken, was a blowout. The Rams put up a 40-burger, but they don't get to play a backup quarterback this time, unfortunately. But before we get into all of that, this might not be too applicable for Rams fans, but the Locked On NFL Draft podcast officially relaunches on September 20th with 2 new hosts around this time. Eric Crocker, former NFL player, one of the co-hosts of the Locked On 49ers podcast. He's going to do the player scouting, and Ryan Tracy brings the analytics. Make sure to follow the Locked On NFL Draft podcast on YouTube, the Odyssey app, or wherever you get your podcasts. And now we could dive into this episode. My man, Brad, I know you had fun watching that. I mean, there's no Rams fan on earth that I think could have scripted a better start to the Rams season there. Of course, the kickoff, not great. The first defensive drive, a little bit shaky, but when that offense came out, man, you cannot script a movie script better than that. I mean, you're talking about Matthew Stafford dropping back. Sauce's a 69-yard, I think it was. Somebody corrected me there and told me that it was like a 67-yard touchdown. If I was wrong, my apologies, a couple yards off. But Brad, man, this game was filled with a lot of good stuff from Matthew Stafford. Some of the people we were talking about, of course, throughout the course of the offseason. I want to hear your opinion of this game, some of your takeaways, how you felt watching this one.
Oh, man, it was just anxiety getting to kickoff, really, right? You got to watch all these games. You got to watch that Packers upset, and that sinks in your head going, what's in store coming up tonight? And then the game kicks off, that kickoff, you're right, and your stomach starts dropping a little bit. You think they're going to, get points on the board. And that's what the Rams really did last year as well, and really the handful of years McVay's been here is that bend but don't break defense. Obviously this year under a different coordinator, but same result. Found a way to not have them put points on the board. And then you're right, just turn around. And we talked about this before we got here. It could have been the 80-yard drive, 10 play. No, Matt Stafford said, look, you guys brought me in here for the deep ball. You will get the deep ball, and he delivers it. So it was just fun. Obviously, it was a little bit closer than needed to be at halftime and maybe at points in the second half. But as soon as the Rams really kind of turned it on defensively, which was really going to help us out, you saw things start to click. So this team is dangerous. The Matt Stafford hitting these deep bombs, also to like wide open guys. And he kind of talked about McVay and the way that he schemes things, and so much just not missing the target deep down the field. And Van Jefferson with a great catch. Him and Cooper Kupp seem to have incredible rhythm together already, which if you got him in fantasy football, you got maybe the right pick out of him and Woods. But it was just fun to watch. It was fun to watch this offense, and then just to see Matt Stafford move and the comfortability that he had, not only in this offense in game 1, the decision-making, only taking 1 sack, no interceptions. And we saw even Jared Goff this week do a pick 6 again to the Niners. It was like flashbacks all over. He's in mid-season form, and it just felt good. It was like all this stuff that you talked about. You made a joke. The Rams don't have to worry about the draft. And for these reasons, right? We got Matt Stafford, we got Jalen Ramsey, and they were definitely worth those picks. Jalen Ramsey on that defense side of the ball is just nasty. He almost seems like he's offended that they're even coming his way when he throws people on the ground. So, man, it was just fun. And near the end in the fourth quarter, and I'm just trying to cover my minus 17 spreads that I was taking, live betting, just going, we're going to do this. So all those different things that came along the way were just a bunch of fun. And it's a great way to kick off. And looking at the NFC West, man, you got to win in week one, and the Rams were able to do it.
Yeah, that NFC West is potent, man. I want to say it was one of two divisions in the NFL this week that went 4-0, and everything we thought of this division looks like it's going to be true, man. This is going to be a dogfight, I think, all the way till the end, unfortunately, for the Rams and everyone that's in that division. But you know what I found interesting was, now that I've sort of had like a day or two to digest this game and go back to watch the film and everything like that, look at the numbers, I actually think the Rams are going to be a lot better moving forward. Like, they hit some of those big plays, of course, right? And we got what we wanted essentially out of that Matthew Stafford trade. You've seen all of the flashes, everything that it makes you excited about his appearance there with the Rams. But I looked at some of those passes, and again, this is, to preface for those that haven't listened over the last few days, or maybe aren't that in tune with what the Rams are doing. None of these guys took snaps in the preseason. Like, they have no chemistry together in real time or in live snaps. And I think that really was visible when you look at some of these passes, like the Stafford to Deshaun Jackson pass, where he's crossing over the middle of the field. He throws it low, and Deshaun Jackson kind of trips up, can't really catch it and run. He catches it, and he's basically on the floor there. The other one, 3rd down, 3rd and 10 to Robert Woods across the middle of the field. If Stafford has much more chemistry with this guy, he's going to lead him. Woods is going to catch it, probably gain another 5 or 6 or maybe 10 yards. And it's not going to be a hard catch for him to make. Whereas, he's kind of jumping, turning backwards like this. He's got to pull it in. That was the one right before the Cooper Kupp 56-yard touchdown, I want to say. But this is good news, right? Because these guys have much more of a ceiling. Like, I think the floor is high because you know what you're going to get out of these guys. They're all good players. And let's be honest here, we can expect a very good offense, but there is a higher ceiling that they have yet to reach. And I think while these, weeks start to get knocked off, some of these games go, some of the rust goes, they're going to be much more comfortable with each other. Stafford's going to learn, the speeds at which these guys are running their routes and where they want passes and things like that. And that just gets me even more excited about this offense, right? Because there's more to be had. And you even look at the running game throughout those first 3 quarters, it was not great, right? It only started to pick up in that fourth quarter. Like, this offense has endless potential, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And even on the defense side of the ball, right? They started slow. They finally got into that rhythm. One of the stats I saw, that Andy Dalton averaged 2.1 seconds times to throw each time that he dropped back. That was the 4th fastest by a quarterback in a game since 2019, meaning he was scared as heck getting the ball out. Not every quarterback's going to be getting the ball out 4th fastest in NFL history in the last handful of years. So that defense had to deal with that. Also, Andy Dalton didn't complete a pass over 10 yards. The Rams kept everything in front, basically said, hey, toss it in front, we'll go get it. The run defense was a little suspect at first. But again, this is first game, new coordinator, everything on the offense side of the ball. So this team is going to slowly come together. And if this defense can continue to kind of finish like they did in that game, it's going to be a fun group to watch on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, before we dive into this next game, it just kind of came into my mind here while you were talking. Andy Dalton's not going to hold the ball. He didn't hold the ball. The guy they're playing next week, man, Carson Wentz, he is notorious for holding the ball. Maybe nobody holds it longer than this guy. I think the Rams are really going to get some opportunities on the defensive side of the ball, for sacks, maybe a few turnovers, maybe some sack fumbles. I think everyone on that side of the ball is probably licking their chops right now, a little bit excited about going against this guy. And the Rams do have a little bit of familiarity with him. They did, unfortunately, tear his ACL back in 2018. I want to say that was Mark Barron, who's no longer with the team, of course. But before we get into all of that, you guys can always follow us on Twitter at Locked On Rams, at QB's MVP, at LA_Rambling Bear, and on YouTube at Locked On Rams. And if you guys want to bet on this week 2 contest between the Rams and the Colts, you guys know the deal. Go check out betonline.ag. They're going to have you guys covered for everything you need to know about every favorite sport that you have, from basketball to football to horse racing to everything in between. They got you covered. BetOnline is your number 1 spot for all the college football and professional football action this season. You can get all your latest updated odds, props, and contests, including the $200,000 Survivor contest and the NFL $500,000 mega contest, both open now at BetOnline. Be sure to take advantage, because BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. That's BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. Brad, just before we get into that, we're going to save that for the last segment. And I think it's going to be kind of juicy because, man, I'm ready to see another game. I'm fiending for a second game. Like this week is going by slow as hell for me. But this game, I still want to kind of touch back on this Chicago Bears-Rams game, right? And you look at the offense. What's funny about it is they ran the second fewest plays this week out of any offense in football, and they still managed a 30-burger. Like, I really think that this offense has different ways to kind of skin the cat, as they say. I don't know, it's kind of a weird saying, but different ways to be productive, right? There's certain weeks where they're not going to go against a front seven like the Bears have, and they're maybe going to run the ball, 25 times, maybe have 175 yards rushing, or maybe they're going to have some of those extended drives where, you have 12 or 15 play drives. You're kind of taking those short gains because teams don't want Matthew Stafford to cook them deep. That's what's exciting to me about this is there is legitimately endless possibilities to that offense. And I'm just kind of curious on your opinion. Now, when you look back to this offense last week, and this was something we discussed off air, Van Jefferson, I was kind of shocked that he was that wide receiver 3, right? I think, throughout the offseason, we talked about it, and I especially talked about it. I thought Deshaun Jackson was going to be the clear-cut receiver 3. I thought he and Jefferson were going to split time for sure, and it was maybe going to be somewhere in that range of 60-40 type of breakup. But Van Jefferson, I want to say, according to PFF, had 34 snaps in that game. Deshaun Jackson, only 14. Was that kind of surprising to you? And, you gave me a good reason as to why that was probably the case. So why don't you kind of share that here?
Yeah, at first it was surprising, but then as we kind of talked off air, is like, hey, we brought this guy in for the long haul, and the knock on him has been getting hurt early. So why go out in game 1 and give him 28 snaps and really stretch his, health or the security of his injury in game 1? You want to find the mix in. Plus, Van Jefferson, a guy that you spent a second-round pick on not too long ago, really finished the season last year really strong, right? Came on, scored a touchdown in that Green Bay game, was a guy that they felt really comfortable going to, and can run the deep ball, can run routes really great, has great hands. So you got to expect who's the long-term option here. It's going to be Van Jefferson. Deshaun Jackson, maybe we get a couple years out of him if we're lucky. They got to continue to develop this talent. So it really kind of, as I think about it more, it's not as surprising as I really thought. Kind of diving into that offense a little bit more on some of the things that were pretty interesting. And you kind of mentioned this, as in this podcast, and then even on Twitter during the game, is talking about this offense is just getting going, right? And one of the things we saw is a lot of shotgun. And that was kind of surprising. We haven't seen a ton of shotgun. I think Stafford dropped back 26 times. Only 8 of them were for play action. Of those 8 play actions, he went 8 for 8, 155 yards and 2 touchdowns. So kind of what you were saying on Twitter is like, hey, the shotgun's kind of cool and it's fun to see it in the offense, but let's kind of mix it up a little bit more, because seeing Matt Stafford with 10 yards of space plus and having all the time in the world to dissect stuff and throw the ball deep really seemed to work out. I understand McVay in the passing game, and even in the years past, has gotten into kind of just getting excited on some of these play callings, throwing a bunch of, throwing the ball a bunch of times, getting shotgun, because he hasn't been able to do it with Goff as much in the past handful of years. So I think seeing a mix of that continue to come and then working back into the run are going to be really big things for this offense. But man, it's nice to know that we've got 4 wide receivers. Didn't even see Tutu Atwell, whether that was, playing kick returning or whatever it was. So, kind of surprising. And maybe that's another thing, is they're going to kind of start to trickle him in a little bit more. But, going back to your original question is, hey, let's see if we can get Deshaun through a whole season and take those deep ball shots, and then really being able to kind of rotate these guys in and kind of, one gets gassed, let's take another one and run them down the field. You got to love to see that deep ball. But you mentioned it the other day. It was first time in a ton of years that a guy debuted and threw 2 deep bombs like that. The other stat that I saw was also that this was the first time that a player, a quarterback, had thrown 2 40-yard touchdowns in the same game since Kirk Cousins back in 2019. So just highlights everywhere for Matt Stafford in that offense. And like you mentioned, this is just scratching the surface on what they can do once they start putting in all these pieces and start, moving on the fly and doing hurry up offense, and being able to have Matt Stafford control that play at the very end where Matt Stafford on his last touchdown pass, where he had all the pressure in the world, stayed in there very comfortable, slid up one step and found Robert Woods at the back of the end zone. That type of stuff all season long is just going to make this podcast on Victory Wednesdays, because I'll continue to piggyback that and take a victory day with my LA shirt every time we get a win, is going to be a ton of fun.
Yeah, no doubt, man. This was a good way to start the season. And the defense, flashed a little bit. They're still getting used to their new coordinator and how he's going to call games and things like that, too. You've seen a lot of those flash plays, right? At the end of the day, that's how you're going to win football games. The more opportunities you can give your offense to go score, especially when you have an offense like that, that's going to be big play and big strike, you're going to have a good chance to win games, right? You're talking about 3 fourth down stops, a turnover in an interception, another forced fumble that was on the sack fumble on 4th down from Justin Hollins. And there was a lot of individual performers in this game that maybe we didn't expect, right? You look at a guy like Kenny Young. We didn't talk about him much throughout the offseason. He played every single snap for the defense, and he had the highest coverage grade of any player, according to PFF. You talk about Justin Hollins, a great game. I mean, this guy was a waiver wire pickup by the Rams. Before last year's season, I think it was from the Denver Broncos. They kicked him to the curb, and now the Rams have a potential quality starter out of, zero investment. So these are the kind of things that make the Rams what they are, which is a good, successful franchise that knows how to find players, knows how to breed talent, and knows how to develop these guys. And I think at the end of the day, you got to give your hat off to Les Snead and Sean McVay for finding the positions to put these guys into to succeed. But I want to spend the majority of this episode diving into this final piece here and talk about this week 2 game between the Rams and the Colts. But before we get into that, make sure to listen to this podcast throughout the rest of the week here at the Locked On Rams pod. Tomorrow, we're going to host our crossover episode with the Locked On Colts host, as well as myself. Of course, we're going to learn more about both teams, especially the Colts here. But before we get there, you guys can go check out DirecTV Stream if you need a way to watch your favorite sports or your favorite entertainment that you love without the hassle, and a great way to get your TV together. It brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch all your favorite sports, movies, and shows in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to ever buy another device ever again. The best part, there is no annual contract, so get rid of the clutter and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. And you guys have heard me talk about the Built Bar here many times. Man, listen, I've tried every protein bar on the market. I've lost a lot of weight throughout the last 2.5 years, and I prioritize my protein more than anything on this earth. They do not taste good for the most part. There's a lot of chalky ones, a lot of very high-calorie ones, some that just don't taste good, some that are expensive. You do not have to worry about any of that with the Built Bar. All you have to do is go check them out at BuiltBar.com. They have a bunch of different flavors. They're all delicious. They're low in calories. They're low in sugar. They have 19 grams of protein per bar. They're high in fiber, and they even work for you if you are on the keto diet. All you have to do, go to BuiltBar.com and use the promo code LOCK15, and you'll get 15% off your next order. Use the promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. And I've mentioned this as well many times. You guys know I like to bet. Brad mentioned that he had a few bets going this past weekend as well. If you guys need assistance with bets, where to go, what lines to take, go check out the Locked On Bets podcast. It's hosted by your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling, 2 of the hosts here on the Locked On Podcast Network. These guys are going to get you right for every single sport, every game day, every Sunday, everything you need to know. Go check them out at Locked On Bets. It's brought to you by betonline.ag, wherever you get your podcasts. And my man Brad, now is the time, right? We've talked about this game a lot. Especially myself. I feel like I've talked about the Bears way too much this season already. I'm dying to see this second game, all right? I've not seen much of the Colts and the Seahawks game, the first one. Of course, the Colts did lose that game. I can't even remember what score it was now. But the Seahawks did win by 2 scores, or nearly 2 touchdowns, I want to say. So it decided victory there. And, of course, the Seahawks are a good team as well. So no shame really into losing to those guys. But you look at this Colts team, right? And I mentioned it, a new quarterback, Carson Wentz. He's only played 1 game there. It's kind of a transition period for them, transition period for the Rams. The exact same type of scenario. Matthew Stafford, veteran quarterback, 1 game with the team. And I don't think Wentz he did not take any preseason snaps with those guys either. So it's kind of eerily similar in terms of the situation here. And the Rams and the Colts do not play often. So there is not much familiarity between these teams, these coaching staffs. And we can get into a prediction in a few moments. But when you kind of look at this game, and the Rams are on the road for the record, what are you sort of looking out for? Are there any players on the Rams sideline that maybe you're kind of keying in on, that you have circled? Maybe on the Colts sideline, any matchups that you like, anything like that? And what potential concerns do you maybe have from this game between the Rams and the Colts too?
Yeah, a couple things to tie up there. 28-16 was the score. Two scores, like you said there. And then shout out to Locked On Bets, because I should have listened to them on Monday night. They told me to take the Raiders, and I just couldn't do it. That is an awesome show. If you're not listening,
Hey man, Q knows the Raiders.
Exactly. I was like, I should have listened. But going back to this game and talking about some of the things that I'm going to be watching. One, you mentioned them in the last segment a little bit, but Justin Hollins, man, coming out and having an incredible game, and really, maybe some cleanup sacks. Aaron Donald had those slippery hands and kind of had a couple fall out, but man, Justin Hollins, I mean, that's really what we need in this defense, is like, hey, Aaron Donald's going to bring a lot of attention. We need people to find their way to get back there, and especially if it wasn't Floyd. It was his first time in his career having a multi-sack game. I do not expect that to be his last of the season. He might have a couple of those this year. We may have two other guys we could have three guys get 10 sacks this year. It is very doable depending on, the type of pressure that we continue to put on there. But with that being said, Carson Wentz had a very poor debut. You talked about all the similarities between those two quarterbacks. One was not their week one performance. He went 25 of 38 passes for Carson Wentz, a guy who didn't play, like you said, all preseason, only got a handful of practices with this team. He was sacked 3 times. His QBR was 26.3. Yikes. He had 2 touchdowns, but those were late garbage touchdowns. This is going to be interesting. You mentioned earlier, this is a guy that likes to hold the football a little bit. This is a guy who was sat out because of an ankle injury that we thought maybe he wouldn't be playing in this game for. So if he goes down a handful more times and keeps getting beat up, and man, this might be a very ugly game for Carson Wentz. So I'm kind of watching those defensive players outside of Aaron Donald, Hollins, Floyd. Who else is going to be getting pressure on Carson Wentz? And what is Wentz going to do with that pressure? Is he going to just eat those sacks and kind of tuck and save himself? Or is he going to try to make it happen downfield, which is not a good plan against this defense as well? You talked about it even on your Twitter, how the Rams were shifting their secondary. They're going to make it tough. Not only has everyone got crazy jersey numbers this year, and it's hard to know who's who and who's where, but they're going to move Jalen Ramsey around. They're going to move D. Will around. David Long Jr. got an interception in the first game. And you talked about, our linebackers stepping up and especially Young in that secondary role and dropping back in some coverage. So this is going to be a really fun matchup. I'm excited for. On the other side of the ball, can Matt Stafford keep throwing the ball downfield, right? I don't expect in any way for it to be a one-game wonder with him with the deep ball, but can McVay continue to scheme him open? I am really curious on Brian Allen game 2, because game 1, man, I think I had to send Allen some Venmo money because he became the starter. I might have to continue to just send it to him weekly because I was a hater. And I'm going to have to come out pretty soon and maybe say I was wrong. I want to see a little bit bigger of a sample size before I start to really eat into this one. But, man, he had a really good game. I think I saw a tweet out here somewhere that said he ranked 4th as far as protection in the NFL. Let me see what I got here. He was 4th in run blocking. There you go. He did great in run blocking too. But obviously he had a couple moments there where he let some pressure through. But overall, extremely impressed with that interior offensive line. A little slow out of the gates with the run game, but things started to open up once obviously people had to start respecting the downfield ball of Matt Stafford. So I think this is a fun one. It's the first game on the road as well. So this is, I always like to look at McVay's team as a very road confident team coming off a big win, huge energy in that build. See them take it on the road, continue to get better on the defense side of the ball, and really just stay on par. Mix in some run early, more play action, 8 play action passes, 8 for 8. If I'm McVay and I'm looking at my call sheet and I'm looking down and he's 6 for 6 at some point, I'm just going to go, I got to get 10, I got to get, 5 or 6 more of these in the game. If we're going to go on that, almost at that point, you're like, let's do it until he throws an incompletion, because he was looking good back there. But I'm stoked for this game. I still think the Colts are in trouble. Seahawks really should have scored an extra couple touchdowns, but they kind of faltered a couple times. So Carson Wentz, man, it's going to be a rough introduction, man. You don't want to see the NFC West, especially back-to-back games to open the season. Really, if you look past their schedule, it doesn't get much easier the next few weeks for them easily. This could be a pretty ugly, maybe a one-hit wonder for Carson Wentz over there. I don't know what they're going to do in Indy.
Yeah, that's a brutal start to the schedule, right? And for the Rams too. I mean, we're talking 2 quality teams here that were both playoff teams last year, and then Tampa Bay next week too. So it doesn't get that much easier, but we'll save that for later. You talked about some interesting things there that I kind of want to touch on as well. You look at that defensive side of the ball, Carson Wentz. What concerns me here is the Seahawks might have the worst cornerback duo or trio in
Exactly.
football. And Carson Wentz will stifle that badly against those guys. That makes me concerned for his well-being in this game. Not as, somebody on the other sideline. I'm excited about this one. I'm thinking number 11 might have a chance here. Darius Williams, for those that don't know, to maybe house call one here. Like this guy is going to push the ball for better or for worse. And he's going to hold on to that thing for a long time. So if there's a game for the Rams here on the defensive side of the ball to really get it together, it's this one. I mean, next week you got Tom Brady. That guy is hardly going to give you any opportunities to make plays on the ball, even though Jordan Fuller did pick him off twice last season. Carson Wentz is going to give your D-line the opportunity to go get, after him, pin their ears back and just focus on rushing the passer. Your secondary, be ready to make plays on the ball because he's going to let it go. He's not going to throw those 3-yard dink and dunk plays like Andy Dalton. The one thing, though, on the defense side of the ball that they have to improve on is tackling, because you go back to last week and they had a lot of light boxes, right? They invited the Bears to try and run the ball, but they got a lot of contact on David Montgomery, but he was breaking tackles and creating a lot of yardage after contact. I want to say, I forget now, according to the PFF numbers, the Bears were like top 2 or top 3 in terms of yards after contact from their running game. So the Rams, even though they had light boxes, they were getting hands on this guy multiple times. They just couldn't bring him down. And that's a shout out to David Montgomery. The guy's tough as hell, really underrated, but doesn't get easier this week. Jonathan Taylor is a stud in Indianapolis. That guy is strong as an ox too. So you're going to make contact with him. If you are, you got to bring this guy down. And there was a couple instances last week where, the Rams get Montgomery in the backfield, their hands on him, but they can't bring him down, which is just tough because, it goes from a tackle for loss to a 9-yard gain, which is never good. So definitely one thing to focus on going into this game. Flipping to the other side of the ball, I'm excited to see what's going to happen here. You mentioned Matt Stafford might go deep. Of course, Matthew Stafford loves to go deep. We know that. We love seeing it in week 1. One of the things looking at this secondary, they are very good, and this defense is very good. But Russell Wilson got them a couple times going deep last week. I mean, I want to say Tyler Lockett scored like a 65-yard touchdown on his own. Wilson looked good throwing that ball, and Stafford might have, the next best deep ball in football. So that's something I'm looking out for as well. And then the last thing for me, and we're going to dive way into more detail into this tomorrow, but Brian Allen, you mentioned him. He had a good game as a run blocker, pass blocker, a little bit up and down. I'm not going to rag on him too much. Akeem Hicks is pretty damn strong. Shout out to him. He's also Canadian, by the way. The dude is literally a bear. Someone called him a literal bear, and I laughed. I was like, you know what? That's a good description of what he is. The guy's just a monster. But it doesn't get easier this week. I mean, he's got to block DeForest Buckner this week a little bit, and that guy was an all-pro last year. He is damn good. So we're going to learn about what Brian Allen is in terms of his pass pro as a run blocker 2 weeks into the season, man. It's not going to get much easier for him, unfortunately. But that's mostly, the kind of things that I have circled for this game. Brad, I'm going to give you a chance now. You can share your prediction. For the record, me and Brad both went 1 for 1 last week. Okay. We both, in our schedule breakdown series, picked the Rams over the Bears. And going into this game, it's a little bit of a toss-up now. I'm going to give you your chance. I'm going to share my prediction tomorrow, so they'll hear mine tomorrow. But the floor is all yours, my friend. Who do you got taking this one?
Yeah, as we talked a little betting earlier, I quick jumped in and looked at the line. It's -3.5 for the Rams, so they're on the road, but only 3.5. I'm going to be hammering that bet. And I probably will even tease it up to -10. I think this is another big win for the Rams. Just watching last week, right? Not every team, and that was one of the things, right? Don't have that overreaction Monday and look back and go, oh, the Packers aren't going to win a game all season and whatever, right? Down the whole line. But I'm just not impressed. I really have never been overly impressed with Carson Wentz. I don't know if he's going to be able to, as you mentioned it, against the Seahawks, really struggled against maybe one of the weaker secondaries in the NFC West, maybe even in the NFC. We'll have to see how this thing plays out. Maybe those guys play up to what we expected. But I think that the pressure that we saw near the end of the game is going to really pick up from the beginning. I think the Rams are going to tackle better. And I think this offense is just like you mentioned, just starting to kind of get it going. So I expect for the Rams to put a lot of pressure on Carson Wentz and I almost said the Eagles, Carson Wentz and the Colts to keep up. And I think that's where the downfall for Carson Wentz is he's going to sling it. He's going to throw it up there. And our secondary might be one of our strengths and what we have if we can stay healthy back there. But he's not going to be able to get away with that. I think Aaron Donald plays a little bit better. And it's not like he played bad, but he just kind of missed a couple of those plays. I think he's going to fix that. So I see this as a big, big win because I see Carson desperate late in the second half. And that's when our defense really becomes really good, because when a team becomes one-dimensional against this defense and those guys up front can pin their ears back and our secondary knows what's coming, man, the other team is in trouble. So I've got the Rams winning big. I think it's close to like another 36-17 type of game. I think we go on the road and we smack them. And I think that's what makes really good teams, especially early on, is beating teams you should beat, and not only just winning, but getting it done late in the fourth quarter and having it have a no doubter, have that stadium quiet, have it, fans head into the parking lot in the third quarter. Let's do it. All Rams fans are going to start getting really loud in that fourth quarter. So if you guys are going to the game, get loud and start moving up in the third, fourth quarter, get some better seats. I think this is going to be a big, big win for the Rams. Not just because I got my Homer glasses on, but I just don't think that they've got the talent to compete. And Carson Wentz still, I think, is a little banged up. I don't think he's 100%.
I like it, man. I like it. It's bold, but I tend to agree. I'm going to say mine for tomorrow. I think the Rams have a really good chance at winning this game. I'll say that because they just match up well, and this team is super talented. They're just getting going, and I just think they got a good shot in this one to maybe not necessarily upset the Colts because the Rams are favored, but to beat down on a team that was a playoff team too. And if we are sitting at 2-0. This time next week, I think that discussion is really going to start to ramp up about, are the Rams the best team in the NFC? And we're going to find that out, I think, in week 3, right? You're going to have the Rams, you're going to have the Bucks, arguably the two best teams in the NFC, duke it out in week 3, a little bit early on the schedule. It would have been nice if that was pushed back a little bit later towards playoff time when everyone was 100%, in season. But man, it's going to be a fun few weeks here for you Rams fans. Of course, that is going to do it for this episode. My man Brad shared the prediction. We're going to see what happens. You're going to hear mine tomorrow. Make sure to tune into that episode on the Locked On Rams pod. We're going to have a crossover between Locked On Rams, Locked On Colts. We'll learn everything we need to know about both teams. Of course, some of the matchups to look out for, my prediction, as well as what's going to happen in this game. Thank you guys so much for listening. As always, just a reminder, you guys can come connect with us on Twitter at QB's MEP, at Locked On Rams, and at LA_Rambling Bear. You can find us on YouTube as well at Locked On Rams. And please subscribe or follow to get our latest episodes, content, breaking news, and a whole lot more.